Hello, welcome. My name's Doug Gordon. I'm hosting the show of Inspirational People, Inspirational Stories, where the aim of the show is to inspiring people by being successful in their field or inspire others to success in some form. Today's guest is Niall Quinn. Niall is a former professional soccer player and the country's second highest ever goal scorer. He has a highly successful club career with spells at Arsenal, Manchester City and Sunderland. And his international career included 2 successful World Cups for Ireland. Post playing football, he's won an honorary MBA. He briefly managed Sunderland before becoming their chairman. He was a television pundit and now a highly successful entrepreneur. I first met Niall at the Wealth Summit, where we shared the stage together. And since then, I've got to know him a little bit. And I have to say, he really is a true inspiration. And having the show. Niall, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Doug. It's an MBE I got, not an MBA. But that's okay. It was at a funny time in my life. So it was when the Troubles were still at their height and the Good Friday Agreement was in progress. And my mother and my wife insisted that I took an honorary MBE that was offered to me. Bertie Ahern was also very kind and asked me to do the same thing. Tony Blair was my local MP. And I felt I had to do that in the end, and I did it. Glad I did now, but it was a tough one at the time, you know, with you know, what was happening in the north. Of course, it turned out to be the right thing, but you know, I had to ask myself a few serious questions before I did it. And my friends, I got an invite then. I didn't go to Buckingham Palace. I went to I had a choice to go to Buckingham Palace or go to the ambassador's residence in Ireland. So I went to the ambassador's residence in Ireland, and my friends, Nicky English, Joe Hayes, you know, great hurlers for Tipperary, they said, look, we'll look after the celebration. We'll bring you somewhere really nice afterwards. And they brought me to the Palace in Fleet Street for a few pints. So I didn't go to the Palace. I didn't do the whole rigmarole. I went to the Palace in Fleet Street, which is a real GAA nationalist pub anyway. Yeah. And so that was my MBE story. So sorry, I interjected your show and I'm taking over.
No, I love it.
I'm so sorry.
No, I love, and one of the things that I love about you, because obviously I heard a little bit about your story when you were speaking at the Wealth Summit, is when you did, for those of you that don't know, in the old days, they didn't make quite as much money as they do now. And in retirement, they used to do a testimonial match and all the proceeds would go to the player. And in your testimonial match, which was Ireland against Sunderland, you made 1.5 million and you gave it all away to charity.
Well, it's very kind of you to present it like that, but how it came about was Sunderland wanted me to sign a new contract, and rather than give me money, offered me a game that I didn't quite deserve because I hadn't done 10 years at the club. So just to qualify what you said there, you also had to have done 10 years at your club to get a testimonial, and I hadn't. I'd only done 6. Okay. And I felt they were using that as a way of not paying me my true reward. And anyway, between the jigs and the reels, I got what I wanted in my contract. I held firm and got the pay rise that I felt I deserved, and I was quite happy with it. But the game was still on the table. And then I said to myself, okay, well, now's a chance to do something good. I've got what I want out of it. I'll donate the game to charity. And that was fine. And what the problem was, it got leaked before I was ready for it. And Tony Blair announced it in Question Time in the Commons. Bertie Ahern announced it in the same structure and shocked it all. And suddenly I was headline newspapers, the first person in the world ever to give his testimonial away. And it got so big so quickly, I hadn't even put a committee together. I'd done nothing about it, had no tickets to sell. And it became something that just took off. And the world of football, you know, embraced it. Sepp Blatter, who was a big noise at the time, and FIFA sent me a fabulous note congratulating me. And it was a curious time, but the most important memory I have of the whole thing was, you know, we could maybe get a big crowd at Sunderland and let's see how we can do that, get the tickets sold. But I got a letter from a Sunderland fan in prison, and his letter changed the whole course of that whole sort of project. And he said, I've been a naughty lad, I've done things I shouldn't have done. He said, I've come to see that in my time here. He said, I'm a huge Sunderland fan, I'm a great admirer of you. I don't have a lot of money. Obviously, I can't attend the game, but if you could send me a non-attendance ticket and a match program, I have £10 saved up, and I'll send it to the charity. It was just a letter, a handwritten letter from, you know, the big prison in Durham. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. I wonder would anybody else do that? And then I got speaking, as I was putting the committee together, to a very good friend of mine in Barclays Bank at the time, who was sponsoring the Premier League. And all the call centres were in Sunderland for Barclays. And he said, so what we'll do, we'll set up around the clock call answering. People do their lunch break, people give an hour, etc., here, there, and everywhere, and we'll do it till 10 o'clock every night from 9 o'clock in the morning, and we'll do non-attendance tickets, and we sold 35,000.
Wow!
So we had to print a ticket, send a match program, and thank people for sending it, and 35,000 people came that way, and 36,000 people came on the night. So in effect, we have 70,000 people in theory bought tickets for the game. And I think without that letter from a guy in a terrible situation, it literally wouldn't have been half the project it turned out to be. But I dare say that 35 would probably have been halved as well, because the whole thing started to generate. And it was great lesson to me. Listen to everybody, and
things come in synchronistically at the right time.
Absolutely, that's exactly. And I just felt, I felt afterwards, always there could be somebody much lower than you, much smaller than you. They'll actually do something that's even bigger and better than you'll ever do. So always be prepared to take on board what people say, and I kind of, it's funny, I quit football very shortly afterwards with the World Cup, and I hit a bit of a lull because suddenly I wasn't getting patted on the back anymore. I wasn't, the star that everybody wanted to talk to. Suddenly I wasn't in the newspapers, wasn't on the TV. I'm kind of in a bit of a rut. But I'd always go back to that point. Say, well, I wasn't as much a rut as that guy, and he made this in theory. Lots of people helped, of course, but in theory he made the whole thing a huge success, and he was facing a 10-year prison sentence. Just shows you.
And you mentioned about getting the pat on the back. And do you know what? What I love about you is that there's a lot of stars out there who, in the public eye, they're this super duper nice person, but when behind closed, they aren't necessarily the same. And I have to say to the audience that this man, I went and I spoke at another event the following week, and a guy came up to me and he said, "Oh, I saw you speaking with Niall Quinn. Do you know him well?" I said, "Look, I've only met him once, but we've been speaking on LinkedIn." He said, "My dad's 90. He used to coach him when we were kids. Could you please ask him to send a happy birthday video?" And I thought to myself, I don't know Niall, but I sent the message across as the promise, and Niall did it. And that just shows the kind of person that you are. So I have a massive hats off.
No, I don't think it does. I was delighted. That man, actually, his name is Jimmy Swords.
Yeah.
And he was from Manortown United, who were my sort of infant club. I was with them from 9 years of age to 16. Yeah. So he was an administrator. He coached lots of teams, but he was, I suppose, the life and soul of that club, along with maybe some other men like him. Our estates would have been built in the 50s, 60s. Yeah. The GAA were banned then, of course, if you played soccer. So it was difficult for men like him to start soccer clubs at a time like that. And they deserve great credit. The volunteerism is what kept soccer alive as the GAA tried to suppress it for all those years. And the church tried to suppress it, and politics tried to suppress it. But people like Jimmy Swords kept the whole thing going. They're unsung heroes in many ways. So when I saw the name, I thought, oh my God, I remember Jimmy. I know as kids, we're not kids anymore. But great people like that is what made Irish Neighbours and made my growing up so easy. And look, I made it in that sport. My family moved out of the area before I came home to Ireland to live, and I'd stopped going back there because my family had left. But when something like that crops up, like that's the easiest thing in the world to do, because what I did was on TV and I got patted on the back, as I said. People like him do. It's never, I suppose there's never an opportunity to publicly say how good it is. I can remember we had a 50-year reunion at the club at the Red Cow, and I went to it, and he was patted on the back a little bit then, but small reward for all the work that he did. So to go and do a video that took 30 seconds was not much at all, let me tell you.
I was still, it's about, there's a lot of people in this world that I find that I've dealt with in the past where they give to get. And that was an act of just giving out of love. And
well, it was a tiny thing, so I wouldn't overdwell on it.
How you do one thing is how you do everything, though.
So, but him and the people around. Geez, I could name guys now. Paddy Brennan, who was a stalwart there at that time. There was a man called Mr. Fox, and these were Misters. In those days when you grew up, you called everybody Mister. There was Mr. Gavin. Like all these people. Kieran Flaherty was my coach for all those years, and met Kieran recently. Sadly, at his father's funeral, and when you look back and you think all the work that people gave to me in a voluntary capacity to help me on that journey, and even though I had a bit of a go to GAA there, but I played for Robert Emmons as well, and all the managers and coaches, and and the people helped me. I have a lovely story. Tom Cullen was a mentor, and Robert Emmett's a real nationalist GAA guy. And I got sent off, and I was needed for a big final. And you were meant to be suspended. And he came on the bus with me to went to Parnell Square to this sort of hearing as to why I shouldn't be suspended. And he said, on the bus on the way in, he said, "No, you have to leave all the speaking to me." He said, "I've got it organised. None of the guys can speak Irish. And they're going to lose their case because they can't speak Irish. But don't you open your mouth. You just say 'sha.' If anybody says anything, or Neil, like, you know," he said, "but other than that," he said, "I'll do it." He said, "We'll win the case." And we went in, and he started rattling off in Irish, and you could see the guys behind the thing. They didn't know what to say or do. And because they didn't know any Irish, I was able to play in the game on the weekend. And getting the bus in with Tom, I was 12 or 13 then or something, you know. So I had these experiences with people who were doing great things for the community and who slipped away in time and don't get credited. So, you know, again, just going back to it, here Jimmy was flying high at 90 was great, and to do a little video, that did not take much of it.
And you've been incredibly successful in terms of football and in terms of business. And you're
checkered, I would say, but yeah.
But if we look back now, I mean, we're similar age. So if you look back now, and if you were able to sit down with your 18 self, what would you tell that man?
What would I tell that at 18? I hate saying I changed this or I changed that, because I think fate has a lot to do with where you end up and your self-belief. I'm delighted I was given a resilience somewhere along the line, be it from my dad, who was a great hurler, worked hard all his life, enjoyed himself, had a great relationship with my mother. My mother was a teacher. She was the one who kind of put manners on us all. He had a bit more development in him. He went to the horses and the dogs. He went to all the hurling matches around the country, brought us in the back of the Volkswagen, you know, everywhere he went. I'm glad I had that upbringing. And then I got to England at 17, went to live with my auntie and uncle. So it was home from home. Matty and Ailish minded me brilliantly. When I was 18, I was let out into the world in many respects on my own. I was in North London. I struggled in my first year as a footballer. They were all much better than me, and I found it hard. I was too tall. I wasn't strong enough. I was twisting my ankles every day. But I eventually got there through perseverance and resilience, and found myself in the reserves. I ran out of youth team football. My story at Arsenal was first year all over the place. Second year in the youth team, I did better. But now, my third year, I had 1 year left on my contract, and I had to play in the reserves. So I was now in with the men. And I looked like a man in terms of how tall I was, etc. But I suppose it took me a while to get as strong as all of those guys, you know, who were ahead of me in the pecking order. They would have been getting better sort of physical coaching than I did for years and years, you know. So you know, it was hard for me. But it started to happen for me. That at 18, it started to happen for me. And my 18-year-old got into the team in August, the reserve team, came back for pre-season, got into the reserve team in August. I scored nearly 20 goals, I think, before the second week of Christmas. And I want to tell you about luck as well. So I call it fate, but I do think there's luck there. So on a Wednesday, I'm told, Don Howe brings me in as the manager of the club at that time. He took over from Terry Neal had signed me. And he said, "Niall," he said, "you still need a bit of strength. You know, we're really happy with what you do, but you're not coming into training tomorrow. You're going to get a train to Port Vale, which is near Stoke. And you're going to meet John Rudge, who's a lovely man. And you're going to play 4th Division football for the next month. And it's going to be great. He's promised to play you in every game, and he's going to toughen you up. And you go with our best wishes. And it's not to say that you're not doing well here. It's to strengthen up so that when you come back, you can make an impact." Geez, that's great, you know. So I went home. I was living on my own then for the first time. I rang my parents and said, "I'm going to Port Vale. I'm going up on the train tomorrow." I had to wait at the club. No online travel in those days. You had to get a ticket faxed through from the train station. And I waited at the club, and the club got me this, and I headed home. Thursday, I got up. I went down on the train to Port Vale, Stoke. Didn't even know where either of them were. And John Rudge met me and said, "You've got to go back. There's been an injury at training this morning, but you'll be back on Monday. You're just back as cover." I thought, "Oh, right, okay." So I got back Thursday, late Thursday. Went in training Friday, and there was another injury. So Tony Woodcock had got injured on the Thursday. Paul Mariner got injured on the Friday. And suddenly my name was in pencil at the bottom of the first team squad. And in those days, it was only one sub. So you had about 16 names all printed, and then number 17 and Quinn in pencil. So I thought, yeah, it's nice. I'm standby, but it's lovely. And so, but I was there. I had to be in those days 1:45 in the dressing room. 1:45 in the dressing room. And it had been 2 o'clock. He'd moved it back quarter of an hour. Right.
By the way, they used to play at 3 o'clock.
They used to play at 3 in those days on a Saturday. And we were playing Liverpool, which was a huge game. Liverpool were top of the league. They had a great team: Dalglish, Rush, Mulvey, Whelan, Lawrenson, Hansen, Grobbler.
Yeah.
And I could go on.
Yeah.
And we were in a bit of a rut. And anyway, cut a long story short, it was also the first ever live top flight game ever shown to Europe on TV. So all over Europe were watching this game. Now, fine, I was on pencil at the bottom of the list. But I stopped, this will tell you what happened on the day. I stopped at Finsbury Park, which is about 3 miles from our stadium, because I knew I could get an Irish newspaper there on a Saturday morning. So I was so sure I wasn't playing. I had a 3-mile walk reading the paper to the ground. And literally I got near the ground, there was an article, Niall Quinn may make his debut. And I thought, how little they know. Freshmen, they know nothing, you know. Wrapped it up, went into the game, sat there, and delighted to be in the first team dressing room on the day of the match. It was a lovely experience, looking around. He named the team, and I was in the team. And that was like, oh my God. And it was a massive struggle for him, because he didn't send me home all worried. Friday night, not sleeping, me trying to get people to the game, bring my mum and dad, get tickets, all, you know, fly over. How can I do all this? You know, nothing at all. You know, my sort of memory of it was going out to do the warm-ups. Like, Jesus Christ, what am I doing here? And I look around and everyone's warming up and I'm going, geez, there's Rush, you know, oh God, there's that beach, this is mad, you know.
Yeah.
There's oh God, Alan Hansen, you know, my God, Mark Lawrence, what's going on here? And then, you know, coach, come on, get yourself here. Oh yeah. And I think the first 15 minutes I was like that in the game. I was totally starstruck in many ways. And then thankfully, I got an elbow from one of the Liverpool players, and it was a bad elbow. And it got me vexed, and I elbowed him back, and we got pulled apart. And then suddenly I was in the game. Yeah. And I scored a few minutes later, scored on my debut. We beat Liverpool 2-0. I was a star overnight in many respects. And obviously wasn't going back to Port Vale on the Monday. We were playing Man United the next game at Old Trafford, and we won that as well. So I had a great start. But I should have been in Port Vale playing in the 4th division, getting stronger. Yeah. And it was just that. For me, it was a lucky series of events. I got there, but when the chance came, I was there to take it. Yeah. I think that was probably, you know, I'm often hard on myself thinking how lucky was I. How did that happen? But then, you know, had I not had a good game, I'd never be heard of again. Yeah. You know, and I had nobody at the game. I had no family. I had nobody there, and my memory of it was it was outside when I came out of the ground afterwards. There was an old friend that used to live near me growing up in Perrystown, and might as well go for him, a drink with him as anybody else, because everybody else Saturday night gone off home with their families, and kind of went on the tube with him and ended up in a nightclub in Richmond or somewhere. I can't quite remember where the nightclub was. And coming out at 2-3 in the morning, and taxi driver going, "Oh, big man, well done today," and not charging. This was the first bit of stardom I had. I came out of a nightclub about 3 o'clock in the morning. It wasn't even a nightclub; it was a live music club actually. And dropping me home at 3 in the morning and saying, "Oh, your goal, you don't have to pay me." Oh my God! So this is what stardom is like. You know, you don't have to pay your taxis late at night.
Talking of stardom now, one of the things that I absolutely love about you, as well as obviously being a legend for Ireland, is the fact that you played in a Manchester City game against Derby. And not only scored the winning goal, but also saved and put Derby down. And I know it wasn't an easy one either. It was like Dean Saunders who used to captain
penalty,
Wales.
Yeah.
So, like, how did you get into goalkeeping? How did you get that kind of opportunity? And, you know, tell us a little bit.
Well, I played in goal from 9 to 12 for the under 12s up to under 14s at Manortown. Yeah. So Mr. Doyle was our manager, and I played in goal. I was tall, so they put me in goal. I was 3 years younger than everybody else, so they stuck me in goal, and I loved it. And I played Gaelic football as well, so I could catch the ball. I was a midfielder in Gaelic football, and went out to over to England as a striker and tried to, you know, work my ticket and get into them. I used to always look at the goalkeepers, go, I should have stuck at goalkeeper. They don't do any of the running. When we do all the running up the hills in those days and up the terraces, the goalkeepers are doing diving and they're doing crossing and they're doing all these different things. They didn't have to run, you know. I was going, they're playing till they're 40, you know, and I'm going, why didn't I stick with being a goalkeeper? So I always had this bit of a graw for being a goalkeeper. And then an opportunity came in that game against Derby. It was the last home game of the season. And I don't know, I'd scored and Tony Copeland got himself sent off. We didn't have a goalkeeper on the bench. And I said, oh, that's it. This is made for me, you know. And looking back now, I was in the moment so much. Like, you know, I can remember and as Dean Saunders was putting the ball on the spot to take the penalty, I can remember Adrian Heath saying to him, he'll say this, he does this all the time, because I used to practice penalties in goal as a goalkeeper. So I used to try and make a few quid. I'd offer players score 3 against me out of 3 for a fiver. And I won more often than not, because someone on the third one would get wobbly and put it over the bar, or, I did it with the Irish team more so than the Man City team. And I can remember Adrian saying he's going to say this, and Dean Saunders laughing, and I will say this. And anyway, I guessed right and say that what I'm more proud of, and it's not on YouTube, and I'd love to know if it was out there, was I came for the cross and knocked over Mick Harford and Mark Wright, who were Mark Wright, big centre halves, and I knocked the 2 of them over and caught them. And I got into the moment, and I started fizzing the ball out with spin on it when I was thrown. I was going, this is great. And I remember one time we were attacking down the other, and even though we 10 men, we were still dominating the game. They went down that day, Derby, and we were flying. And I was bored. I hadn't had anything to do for 5 minutes. And I can remember, I don't know where this came from in my head, but I can remember going to the physio, come here. And the physio, like a hot day, last day of the season in May, and he's running with his tracksuit on, he's got the big thing, and he comes flying out. Okay, I went, I have a bit of dirt in my shorts there. Would you be able to do anything with it? And he went, and he'd have to run back to the track. I was laughing my head off, And afterwards, I thought about it and thought, geez, that was my mentality was never to get nervous about that. I think I couldn't do it. It was to, hey, I was born to do this, and then there are times when you think afterwards, geez, did I get away with that? How did that work? And another penalty incident, I took a penalty at Wembley in the playoffs, in the shootout, and we were 6-5 down, and I had to score to keep the penalty shootout going. And I did score, and I was really calm and cool, and I knew I'd score. But I remember walking back to the halfway line thinking, it's like something flowed through my body to say, how did you get that? But until that happened, I was in charge. And then we missed the very next penalty. Mickey Graham missed the next penalty. And to this day, he's still receiving stick over it. And I can remember thinking, Jesus, thank God that wasn't me. And I couldn't coach you and tell you why I felt as strong as I did both times. But I know afterwards, I thought, wow, God, how did I do that? And the other little side story to saving the penalty was, in those days, there was no electronic voting. There was no sort of social media for fans. That was the day Man City voted their player of the year. And they left pieces of paper on all of the seats. And going into the terraces, you were handed a piece of paper. And of course, I scored a winner and saved a penalty. I didn't matter.
No-brainer.
David White had a brilliant season. Right, he was 20 to 1 on to be player of the year. Yeah. But unfortunately, like the Eurovision votes going a bit funny, I ended up becoming player of the year because of that moment. Yeah,
that's fantastic. And you've had remarkable success. And how much do you think it's hard grind and talent, and how much do you think is pure mindset?
I think there's a really good mixture of all that, and I think resilience, I feel, is the key to giving yourself a chance to do the other things, because we'll all get knocked, and we'll all be told you're not good enough by somebody. That's only one opinion. Yeah. Always remember that, and finding your way around that, I think, is the key. And I think that's resilience. And I took some knocks when I was at Arsenal. The first youth coach didn't like me at all, didn't get me. And it was difficult for me, but I kept persevering. He moved up the ladder and went to the reserve. So he was going to be my reserve team coach if I was to get it. It didn't look good for me, in my third year. And in my last year, in that second year, Pat Rice came to Arsenal. He quit as a player and came as youth team coach. Now, he was later to go on and have such great success with Arsene Wenger as his number 2. But in his early fledgling sort of coaching career, he pulled me to one side and said, you remind me of me. I come over from Belfast. They were all better than me. He said, I had a determination. He said, I can see it in you. You're athletic, you're a sportsman. He said, but you've got to toughen up and be the boss around here. And you know what? There was somebody who believed in me. And the difference that made, and I'll tell you loads of things about him. We haven't got enough time, but I'll tell you one thing he preached into me. He said, always, always follow in a shot. He said, one day a goalkeeper will make a mistake, and it could be a big goal for you. Mark my words. So I did that all the time. That's how I scored in my debut against Liverpool. Bruce Grobbelaar went down and fumbled, and I ran in and slid it into the net. Holland World Cup 1990, the exact same thing. And so I surrounded myself with good people who liked me, and I didn't get caught up with the coach who didn't. And I found my way, and I found that the road for me and the lane that I needed to be in with the help of great mentors who believed in me, you know. And I when I speak to coaches, you know, I spoke and I wasn't a coach, and you know, I wasn't going in there saying this is how you have to coach. I would never say that to soccer coaches. But what I would say is, you have no idea how important you are, perhaps, to one or two of those players. Not just to bring them to the top of the world in terms of soccer, but to bring them somewhere in their lives. And the power of a coach on a football pitch and in the journey back into the dressing room with an arm around, or on the way into the car park and chatting about how you're doing, how's life. I think we all need that shoulder of experience to sort of come in and sort of put your head against and say, where am I going wrong? How can I do better? And anybody who's made it will always point back to the guy who got them into, whether that's golf, whether that's sport, even business. Yeah. You know, there's that whole sort of idea that, you know, you can, and then when you do make it, and whatever way you make it, wherever you get to, it's remembering to go back and do the same thing. Yeah. You know, and Pat Rice, I remember he was just a fantastic man, still is. I remember saying to Pat years later, I'd left and I got, my career really took off after I left Arsenal. It really got going for me. I think I was scoring in World Cups and I met Pat. And I went, Pat, I'll always be grateful. And he went, you know how you'd be grateful to me? Pass it on. And it was wonderful, you know. Model of masters. Exactly. Yeah. So you've all the right terms for everything. That's right. That's where footballers, you know, when you were going to college at night and I was going to the pub at night, there's the difference. But we have the same sort of view and experience and things to understand the value and the power of that person who got you feeling better about yourself, you know, in all walks of life.
And I think the power of appreciation in sport, business, is really paramount now, to have that kind of leadership of inspire and trust rather than command and control.
Yes, yeah, I'd say that's great. Now, I played under George Graham, who was a terrific record as a manager of Arsenal, and, you know, played me for a whole year in the team, so believed in me. He must have done. Alan Smith came and then he believed less in me. Alan Smith was a great player, so I was on the bench a lot and in the reserves, but I was afraid of my life. To this day, I'm still afraid of him. Yeah. You know, and that was, you know, and I think there's some Man United players say the same thing about Sir Alex Ferguson, you know, and that, I think when I look back and I think about, you know, who made it under that regime and who didn't, the ones who made it were the toughest, nastiest, resilient, hardest, and others then develop, and those type of players developed skill sets as well to come with it. It wasn't just that they were hard and they were tough lads. Tactically, they were put in the right place. George was a great tactician. But I left, and the reason I'm saying is I left Arsenal. My career was in jeopardy in many ways. I hadn't really played a lot in 3 years. Ireland had qualified for a World Cup. Jack Charlton said, if you're not playing, I'm not bringing you to the World Cup. I had to get to that World Cup, and eventually they agreed to let me go in March before the World Cup. And Howard Kendall was the manager at Man City. They were bottom of the league. And I went in, and he went, we're building it around you. You're the man. I went in there going, this is unbelievable. I've got somebody who believes me, trust me. And we had 9 games. I think we won 6 of them. And we finished 12th or 13th, something like that. We had a huge run. And I scored 20 league goals the next year under Howard. And I now know that Howard's way, Howard's way or George Graham's way, give me Howard's way every day.
And obviously then you had a great stint on City, Man City, scoring over 60 goals and great stuff and all that. And then went on to Sunderland. Which...
You're reading the league stats, so all of us footballers were very proud. And we love our goal scorers, but counting FA Cup and League Cup, it's nearly 80.
Oh, is it? Okay. I was reading your Wikipedia, so...
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's have a word of Wikipedia. No, it would be really vain if I went in and changed the Wikipedia. You know, that would be really bad. That would be too much. But yeah, no, because the FA Cup was huge in them days, you know, and League Cup, you know, at Arsenal, I got to 2 League Cup finals. You know, won against Liverpool, lost against Liverpool. But yeah, so I went to Man City and my career took off then.
Yeah. And then went on, I know you had a few injuries and stuff like that, but then got a break over at Sunderland and developed an amazing partnership with Kevin Phillips and, you know, and obviously Sunderland went from there and obviously became an absolute legend in Sunderland as well.
Well, it went well. Sunderland, very, very fond of Sunderland. The people were great to me. And I didn't give them the best start in life. I was their record signing, signed me for 1.3 million from Manchester City, who'd just been relegated. And lo and behold, 6 games in, I do my other cruise ship, and I'm now a passenger in a really difficult season for them. I was the most expensive player. Tried to come back too soon near the end of the season. I couldn't really run properly, but I was hoping that I could do something that would help the team, and we just failed at the last hurdle and we got relegated. So tough time. Some of the fans very unhappy. I'd had an awful time, really. But I think that's when the resilience really kicked in. You know, when I look back now, the easiest thing in the world for me was to say, oh, I don't like it up here. You know, I'm going to finish my career somewhere else. But I rolled my sleeves up. And you know what? The Northeast, the mentality that people have up there, the work ethic they have, they respected that I was having a right go and that I wasn't, you know, going to just, you know, call in the insurance and walk away and say Sunderland never saw the best of me. I was determined that they would see the best of me. And I'd become a smarter footballer at that stage anyway. You know, I wasn't trying to do things I wasn't able to do. I was, you know, sort of influencing the game pretty well. I'd learned lots of good stuff by that time. And so I started to recover. I got a lovely operation. Mr. Ballin did my operation. And I eventually got there. I very nearly quit. The PFA sent the papers that I would have to sign, showed me how I'd have to structure how I quit in order to maximize my payout in the future, etc. So I was kind of there, and I said, no, this isn't going to happen. I've got more in me. And it coincided with a lad called Kevin Phillips walking in the door that nobody had heard of. You know, the word out there in all the newspapers was we were signing David Connolly from Watford, who I knew well, who was scoring lots of goals. And when Kevin Phillips came, everyone, Kevin who? What's he reading there? It was a really negative sort of outpouring of discontent from the supporters. And this guy walks in, we didn't know, nobody knew him, didn't know anything about him. And suddenly he's putting balls in the top corner from 25 yards. He's scoring headers. He's, you know, scoring with either foot. And, well, this guy's good. And so Peter Reid throws him in with me up front. We play City. I think he scores 2. He gets injured that season and still, I think he missed a third of the season. He gets 26 goals. We miss out in the playoffs at Wembley. He's had to go off injured. So, you know, I think we'd have won if he'd have stayed on. We have another year in the championship. I think he gets 30 something goals, you know, and suddenly I've got somebody who's bringing me on a kind of an Indian summer where, you know, I'm 32, 33 at this stage. And we march into the Premier League. We beat the record points total. We've won it in March. We go drinking for 2 months. We could have put a record total that would never be surpassed. But once we got promoted, we were promotion by March in the Premier League next year. So you're celebrating till May. You're going to all the supporters clubs dues. It was a fabulous time socially. All the families joined in, and with stuff. There was balls for the families, and there was dues for the children that we went to, and there was supporters dues, and the open bus, you know, the open top bus. So I can remember all that, and then we said, right, okay, Premier League, how are we going to do this? And this is my first ever kind of negotiation, other than my own contract. And Bob Murray used to call in Kevin Ball, who was the club captain. And every year he'd say, no money, no money, no money. And poor Bally got in touch with me. He said, I'm not able to do this anymore. You know, I'm trying to fight him. And then it looks bad on my contract. He said, I got to step away from this. Will you come in and do the negotiations for the Premier League? And I went, yeah, I'll see him. So chairman, anyway, Bob Murray calls me and he went, okay, he said, I don't want to waste anybody's time here. I hope you like what I'm going to say. Now, we were on, the last time in the Premier League 2 years earlier, we were on 300 a win, 150 a draw, right? So we definitely won't need more than that this time around, and give us some incentive. I have all my lines ready to go, you know, and I go in and he said, I don't want you to say a word, I just want you to hear me out. Okay, he said, this is what we're doing. So against the teams in the bottom half of the table, you're on 3,000 a home win, 4,000 an away win, 1,500 a draw. Right, okay. Up here, the top ones, they're the most important ones. You're on 5,000 to win, 4,000, 5,000 away, 4,000 at home. You know, up to, and I went, so my first thing was, well, if you want us to stay up, give us those for the lesser ones, because they're the ones we can beat. And he went, that's a great idea, Niall. And he flipped it on its head. And then I said, well, hang on a minute, what if we beat them? He said, you know what, we're playing Liverpool, what a great thing to be for the club. You should do it for the whole lot. You're dead right, Niall. And then suddenly we're on 5,000 to win, we're on 3,000 to draw. The whole thing was put right up. And I had to go back into our dressing room. Now remember, we come from 350 and 150. And I went, lads, I think I've done really well, you know. So they're all looking at me. And I saw Kevin Ball's face drop when I said, yeah, I did a real good job negotiating there. Here's what we have. I was a hero. You can imagine that. So it was lovely. And there's a lovely shot somewhere along the way, and I'd love to root it out somewhere if somebody got it, but it's in a game that season, and Alex Ray, Scottish fella, great lad, like one of the team. Alex is great. And Alex is going, this is about 10, 15 minutes ago, he's going, and really what he's saying is there's 5 big ones. And the commentator says something like, Alex Ray, obviously they may be targeting something to do with the Arsenal number 5. It wasn't, it was $5,000. You took $5,000, that's $5,000, come on, 5 big ones, you know. And it was amazing because that's gone out of the game now because they're paid so much. You know, that the bonuses don't even count, really. But that was sort of when I became a little bit of a legend in the dressing room.
Not obviously a very good negotiator.
Well, it kind of fell my way, if the truth be known, you know. Yeah. And sorry, we started this conversation about Kevin Phillips, and Kevin Phillips just kept chucking in these goals all the time, to the point which is hard to believe. And people say, really, did this happen? He's the only English player ever to win the European Golden Boot, and he did it playing for Sunderland, who finished 7th. Wow! You know, so it wasn't Shearer, Blackburn winning the league. Henry, Arsenal winning the league, loads of goals. It was actually in a team that struggled in many respects to finish 7th. Wow. And I think that that is huge. You know, and I got credit on the back of that for being a strike partner. And, you know, you laid on all them goals from. Actually, I laid on very few when you look at it, you know, and don't broadcast that too much. But we had an understanding, and the understanding was, don't train together, don't complicate it. And if I'm going for a ball, I'll always expect you to go inside. Wherever I am, it'll always be inside. And what he used to do brilliantly, he'd feign to run outside just before the ball came to me. He would shift the defender a yard, and then he'd go inside. I would knock the ball. I didn't have to get it anywhere except in a path. And he was brilliant at it. You know, he could, and therefore he was away. And his other great strength was when a goal opportunity came, he had ice in his veins. So it was easy for him. He was in the park, playing with his mates. There was no pressure. You know, I see other players and, oh my God, that scored. Jeez, I missed again. You know, he was the exact opposite. He was ice. And I felt really sorry for him because his time at his best, when he should have been getting lots of caps for England, Shearer was around. But not only was Shearer around and Michael Owen, Kevin Keegan was the manager. And Keegan was Shearer's manager. And so he never got that. But he got a few friendly caps and what have you. But he didn't. I think he didn't get rewarded nationally the way he should have done. And he kept scoring goals up until he was 40 years of age for other clubs. You know? No, he's great fella.
Now, one of the things you mentioned there was negotiation. And obviously, since playing, you've done some great negotiation. One as chairman of Sunderland, which you told me about at the Well Summer. But also now you're working, and one of the things you also mentioned actually on your speech, which anybody's looking for a fantastic speaker anywhere in the world to do with resilience, to do with team play, to do with leadership. Get in touch. This man is amazing. And he comes with a really genuine way of delivering his communication on stage fantastically well. Definitely for any end. Anyway,
thank you.
But one of the things you said, one you told me about your negotiation, which is fantastic in terms of a business with an entrepreneur and everything like that. But also you sort of talked about the importance of family and importance of not spending too much time outside of that. And I know now you're in collaboration and partnership with your daughter, actually, in terms of working on a new project, which is helping children in terms of soccer and everything like that. Do you want to tell the audience a little bit about that?
Okay, very kind of you. Very, very quickly. I left TV, I'd said enough. I had 3 years left on my Sky contract, and I just felt the game was changing completely. I played in a different era, and in order to stay, I suppose, in the modern way, I would have had to change a lot about how I believe the game is or was. And, you know, to stay relevant, I would probably have to become somebody who either learned a whole lot about tactics and learned a lot about possession and stats and understood training methods better and diets better, totally alien to what I did. Or I become a pantomime villain and just start crucifying players. And neither of them appealed to me. I'd done my time. There had to be something else out there for me. So I did that some years ago. I left TV and started looking at the world of business a little bit more deeply. Jumped on a startup or two. Good, average, not so good. Learned what I could about it, but finally come up with a project that has me jumping out of bed every day. And you're right, my daughter is the CEO of the company, is Team TACA. TACA is Irish for support, so it's team support. And what we do, we have a private podcast, an empowering educational private podcast for every American youth soccer club. So what that means is we put some really smart content in the middle of every podcast. It's a communal piece with world leaders, be it the world's top coaches, the world's top players, top academy directors, top physicians, top dietitians, top psychologists. And we spread the word within that club through a private podcast on an app where only club members get it. So it's not Spotify, it's not a public app. And we then get the club to top and tail it with their own input, which effectively is reinforcing what we're saying in a local capacity by telling the parents and the players, that we as a club are driving to the same ambition and the same principles and the same relevance as what Pep Guardiola has just spoken about in our club podcast. And we want the kids to learn from this, so much so that it's part of the curriculum. And we're going to ask the kids questions on next session about what Guardiola has to say, what our coaches have to say in our piece. And we also give them the tail of the podcast. We do 10 or 12 minutes for them at the front of the podcast, and we give them 5 to 7 at the back, where they can do player of the week, they can do various sponsor messages, etc. And generally, we're kind of taking over from the emails and newsletters that clubs send out, and it's you're speaking to the audience as opposed to sending emails and hoping they're open. The click rates these days are very poor, stuff like that. So we're getting great traction in the States. So we went out, had a month together. We soft launched at a big soccer convention in January, and we went out then as part of a trial. We had 6 clubs who did 24 podcasts, and our middle content is hosted. We have our own hosts. Jeff Shreves from Sky TV would be our host for the Stardust that we get from Europe. Ali Wagner's would be his counterpart in the United States. A woman called Sky Eddie Bruce, she has had a platform called BetterSoccerParenting.com for a long time now, because such is the problem in the United States, because it's a pay-to-play model. Parents pay for their kids to play football. It's a very privileged sport to play in. It's unlike everywhere else in the world where it's an inner city sport trying to come out of the lower classes, which is, where there's Brazil, all these countries that, it's the exact opposite in the States. Soccer mom is keeping a whole industry up here where all of the coaches are paid. It's a pay-to-play model. So what that means is some parents get irritated very quickly and very easily because they're paying all this money and their kids aren't progressing. And Sky helps us with that part of the education piece. So we're not just educating the players, it's also for the parents. And then we have a guy, Johnny Collins. Johnny's a wonderful guy, a great host. Johnny is an official ambassador and coach for the United Nations. So he gets brought into war-torn areas, brings different sides together through football, kids, and coaches them and gets them to learn an awful lot more than just soccer skills and abilities, but an awful lot about life. And in war-torn areas, that's an incredible job. He has incredible stories to tell as well. He's also coached the US amputee team, and he brought a guest on, Amy Donathan. 32 players were selected for the US amputee team to play in the World Cup. One girl. And this girl got through. She got through onto the team and became a star player. And her story was just off the charts. I sent it to you.
Yeah,
and so by sending stuff like that out into the club, getting the club's philosophy out there, we've hit on an ability for the club to be, and their values really, to be better recognized in the community that they operate in. It's a tough market. It's a competitive economic market. It's not like here, there's no volunteers. Yeah. So it's a totally different model to what we know here in Ireland. But we found something that helps the clubs. And Aisling and I did almost a month, 27 days. We visited 35 of these clubs in 10 different cities. Planes, trains, and automobiles. It was great. We were in bunk beds in one place. Boston Marathon was on. We couldn't get a place in Boston, so we ended up in bunk beds at a hostel. And we had a wonderful time, and it was great because when you go to a youth soccer club in America and you look at the numbers, they might have 3,000 players. You go, oh, this is crazy, and you go and meet them, but you also see the work that they put in and how dedicated the coaches are. They're paid coaches, and in many respects, they're sometimes players that didn't quite make it in England or Ireland. They've relocated, made a life over there, probably played a bit over there in college, got their coaching badges, but now, you know, have a very decent job. They might have 3 or 4 teams. They do their administrative work every day. They come in at midday. They've lots of administrative work to do with all those 3, 4 teams, whether it's travel, matches, you know, arranging stuff. And they then go and coach them in the evening time, you know, and they're paid, and rightly so. It's a professional job. And the clubs make a great case of saying why they should be paid and why the parents need to pay over there. They don't have the Dublin County Council giving them 50 pitches in the Phoenix Park. They've got to buy their own pitch. Yeah. So the whole thing has their own training centres, etc. So it's an amazing industry. And
you were telling me as well that this could actually be replicated in other sports as well.
Yeah, it's ready to go in other sports, and we're speaking to a company now about how that could be, I suppose, brought forward. And you know, anywhere where there's subscription-based sports, you know, and in the United States, that takes in American football, basketball, volleyball, field hockey, lacrosse. There's so many sports over there, and it's so big, it's so vast, you know. But we've had a great few months together. Ashley worked for a group called Thriftify in the e-commerce space, and she left Thriftify about 6-8 weeks ago on the basis that we were now starting to get contracts and starting to get clubs on board, you know. And she came out and had that month then when she left. We went out to see what is the audience like, and it's, you know, it's great. I mean, it's a great road to go on with your daughter, but it was very much business first, and I think it was a huge learning curve for both of us in terms of understanding each other's strengths. You know, literally on the road day to day. I mean, you know, we were playing trains and automobiles, and we were kind of saying, geez, I wonder did the Beatles get it this hard when they came to and they came, because we were like, oh my God, where are we today, you know. But it was great. The trials went really well with the 6 clubs. You know, we educate their one person at their club to be the host. Chemistry Media here in Dublin do all that for us, and then we edit everything they do. We do our Stardust piece in the middle. We do that ourselves. We link it all together with the top and tail from the club. And one of the things we've learned in the trials, which was really, really interesting and good, was the more sophisticated clubs who could, you know, probably do better because they had, you know, somebody had done podcasts before, made it brighter, brought great subjects into play in their piece of the podcast. We can then feed that into the other clubs and say, hey, you should do this. So we're kind of doing good things throughout the circle, if you like, of the podcast. And I'll just finish you there with, you know, Ash and I went to Kansas first to the Coaches Conference about 18 months ago, and I met Soccer.com. They asked me to speak at the event, and I was blown away by the whole industry. 8,000 people just after pandemic came together for a youth soccer conference, and they said, oh, this is small, there'll be 12,000 at the next one. And I went to it and I was blown away, and I said, I've got to do something here. This is amazing. And they just said to me, Soccer.com, we're a huge player. Like O'Neill's in Irish sport. They provide all the apparel for the US soccer world, and second generation Irish family, fabulous people, Moylans. And they said, bring something that's decent for American youth soccer and we'll back you. But if it's not, we won't. Very black and white. And so we had a look. And we went to Philadelphia this year. We soft launched this podcast idea. We managed to get 6 clubs who trial for us, and it's been a great journey since then. And I guess the biggest learning of it was, you know, I put some money in and invested in other sort of software startups, etc. E-commerce wasn't my world. This is my world. Sport is my world. You know, so what I bring to it is. Yes, I can open doors, and the soccer world in the United States is glad to see me. You can't go there empty-handed either. You must have something. So I open a few doors, but it's great to see young people like Ash and like people that we have working for us who sees on their moment to make it better for our potential client to win the business. And it's not me there thinking I did that. You know, all I do is open the door. You know, and I go and visit and say, look, we're a company that believes we can help youth soccer here, or indeed any sport as it turns out, or religions even. You know, there's so many things you can do private podcasts for. Yeah. But what I've learned is I've learned my lane, and it's the first time since I played football that I'm really comfortable in a lane. I wasn't that comfortable with TV. I wasn't comfortable with sort of technology investments that I made that really were above my head. And even though this is a part technology play with podcasts and editing and what have you, and there's an e-commerce platform in the app as well. I'm comfortable. I'm easy with it. I get it. I understand it. I know the value it can bring to clubs, and so I have a role to play in that. I do that, But the most important thing, since I was playing with Sunderland all those years ago, this is the first time I'm jumping out of bed. Whoa, let's get it going again today. And I think that probably tells you where I am with it upstairs.
Absolutely.
You know, and if you're right up there and you find something like that, then you're.
I love that, man. And I can see I always say to people, sometimes they have to drag themselves out of bed, drag themselves into the, and I can see the passion in you. And when you have passion and purpose in anything you do in life, it's going to give a sense of meaning. It's also, well, meaning obviously is helping kids all around the world.
Yeah, helps to make a few quid as well.
And that's not too bad as well. And I'm sure if there's anybody out there who's interested in this, obviously get in touch, because I'm sure any help, any collaboration, and even any funding, I'm sure will be much appreciated if anybody's interested as well.
Very good.
Now, we're going to finish up, but I just want to say one last thing that I want to mention, because I've just written a book, and I know you have an amazing autobiography out there that won 2 awards, and a fantastic book. If anybody hasn't read it, by the way, it's still available on Amazon and all the different shops.
At the discount store.
It is definitely worth a read, because this guy is such an interesting character, and you get a lot of stories about the backdrop of football and everything like that as well.
Well, it's kind of me to do that, but that book is a bit of a thorn in my side. So I'd given the testimonial ways you mentioned earlier, and then I got offered to do a book, and I turned it down. But Michael Kennedy, who was my solicitor at the time, insisted and got Gillian to say he's got to do a book. He can't just quit football and not have a payday. He's given his payday away. He just needs to do the book. So they talked me into it. Then the World Cup happened, Saipan happened, and the world went a little bit mad. And I went, oh, hey, I'm not getting involved in that. I'm not doing the book. But I'd signed a contract, and the publisher had given an advance to the agent who Michael Kennedy had dealt with, who I hadn't met. So it was quite a big advance. It was 250,000 sterling. It was a huge advance. And I had to have a book delivered by October. And I went, no, I'm not doing it. Too much stuff in the air, too raw, Saipan, not doing it. Be a distraction. That was fine till the publishers sent a big legal letter saying, we'll come after you for the 250,000 if you don't do this. And I went, okay, well, I'll just give it back to you. And they went, no. And they started, well, there's also the profits that we'd expected to make. So suddenly it's not going to have to do this book. And I rang an Irish journalist who I knew well at the time. And I said, I'm in a bit of trouble here. Would you help me? And I'll give you a third of the money. So that was fine. We do that. And we did it in 16 days just to get it done. Just want it done, get it out of my way. I'm not even going to promote this. It was against my wishes, but I felt, I did it for a publishing company who threatened to sue me. But I did it, and we did it in 16 days. Now, for some reason, the book worked. I often think about it, think, God, if we had spent more time, we'd probably made a mess of it. We just went in, dug it in, got into it. And anyway, so the story of the book was the agent ran away with all of the money. So the 250 grand went missing. Never got it back. I had to pay my co-writer and helper, if you like. I had to pay him a third of that. So now it's cost me lots of 80 odd grand, 83 grand. And not long afterwards, that poor fella ended up in prison. The guy who'd helped me, and it was just that book just comes back to me in my head as a bit of a disaster, really. But as you rightly say, it won the W.H. Smith Best Sports Book Award. It was joined in the voting of the big one, which is the William Hill Sports Book of the Year, right? So we were at the luncheon for that in London, and I was called out on equal votes with a cricket book. And how they decided who should win it then was the chairman got the casting vote, and the chairman of the voting committee was John Inverdale. I had to go with one person in the book, John Inverdale. So that book was just, I don't know, it was just one of those things, oh my God, you couldn't make that up, I'd won attack in the book. I'd gone on the show and I found him to be awful. Yeah. And I let the world know how awful he was. And he said, well, Niall's book is so good and there's some really great, interesting stuff in it. But cricket, what a great story this is about a South African cricketer. I'm giving my vote goes to the cricketer. And Tom and I, who was with me at the time, just looked at it. We were never going to get that one. so look, it is what it is. It could have been bigger and better and something to be more proud of. It really doesn't bother me if anybody reads it or not.
No, I think the thing for the audience is that if you do want any more insights into Niall, obviously there's loads on the internet, but there's also a fantastic book out there that's well worth reading.
That's kind of it.
And my last question, which I always ask all my guests. I mean, you've written a book. It's been a successful book, but I know you're a very well-read man as well in terms of lots of different things. What book would you highly recommend as probably one of the best personal development, mindset, or even sport books that you've read before?
Well, I read a few. Before he was outed for what he was, I read a Lance Armstrong book and thought it was amazing, you know, and I thought, wow, that mindset, that whole place. But obviously that falls flat now when you look at the aftermath of his real world. Have I gone in and took somebody's book as a Bible that I learned from? Not really. I think the most impactful book I ever read, this may say something about me, the most impactful book I think I've ever read in my life was Tuesdays with Murray. And that just stopped me in my tracks and made me reevaluate why I'm here and what we do and the race to be successful versus, you know, the strength you get from being a half decent bloke and not getting carried away with the madness of success and pats on the back. And going back to what I said about Pat Rice, you know, getting a bit of a kick out of turning around to the next fella and helping him a step away. Tuesdays with Murray is a must read. Now it's not the big impactful business book that you're probably asking me to. Yours, yeah, yours.
Well, this is my friend.
That's the latest one. So I'll read this now because I'm going to take it off you.
Yeah, absolutely.
You'll sign it for me,
of course.
and I will read that. But I think the power of Tuesdays with Murray and the story of that old professor and everything that he stood for and where he'd come from and the bright student coming through and wanting to be the best. I'm going to shoot the world, and you know, I'm going to shoot the lights out. I'm going to do this, and to be humbled and brought back down and understanding the journey of life. I think that's as good a book if I was to recommend any book. On top of this one, that would be the one I'd book. That's the one that caught me and got into me and made me go, oh my God, well, you know, there's a different reason why we're all here. It's not to be the best, not to score all the goals, not to have the best business. Yeah. There's other reasons to be here.
Well, do you know what? Having met you at the Wealth Summit and done I spoke obviously before you, and you came up straight away and introduced yourself just as if you're the most humble, kind man. And we spent, I think, probably about half an hour chatting before you went on. Yeah. And I have to say, it's an absolute pleasure getting to
great to meet you. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming to see me and allowing me on your platform and being so kind. And well done with everything you do. Keep it up. If I can help, and I think if you might help, I'll give you a shout too. I think that's how the world works, isn't it?
Absolutely. Niall, thank you so much.
Thank you. Pleasure.